Well, thank you, Dr. Mark Yong. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to pick up from where my good friend Datuk Sri Wong Ken Tao left off, namely to look at perhaps a broader regional perspective. We have been talking about BIMP-EAGA, as Datuk Wong said, since the mid-1990s, when I was still a student in the United States. I came back to Sabah, and then suddenly there was this initiative called BIMP-EAGA. And in the 20 years that I have been spending my time in KK, and then in KL, and then in Singapore, and now in KL again, I have listened a lot to BIMP-EAGA, but frankly speaking, nothing substantial has come about on BIMP-EAGA. Meanwhile, in the region, a lot of various other initiatives have really taken off. To give an example, the whole of ASEAN, and not only Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines, the 10 countries of ASEAN, they have come together into an ASEAN economic community with supposedly free trade facilities for all member states of ASEAN to reduce and remove all the tariffs and non-tariffs barriers. So this is, of course, one opportunity whereby you could see goods manufactured in one ASEAN country be shipped to another ASEAN country for consumption, for example. You have also recently the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. This is a free trade agreement encompassing not only the 10 ASEAN countries, but also China, Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. A much larger free trade zone for the region, encompassing again almost 1/3 of the world's population, as well as 1/3 of the world's overall gross domestic products, or GDP. Again, supposedly these are going to generate a lot of trade volume, and still perhaps we are not tapping into it. Then there's China's well, it used to be called One Belt, One Road, but nowadays it's called the Belt and Road Initiative, which has been around for at least 6 years. And again, you're seeing China going around the Southeast Asian countries, as well as the Middle East, South Asia, and even East Africa to invest, to build a lot of well, ports and railroads and highways and airports and so on, but so far again not so much in Sabah, for example. So we have all these various regional initiatives, and then now there's also this well, the so-called CPTPP. Which used to involve the United States, but now the United States has withdrawn, perhaps coming back soon with the Biden administration. But again, there are all these wonderful free trade initiatives, which perhaps we did not quite sort of get hold of. I will give you one example. For example, Datuk Wong just now mentioned about trading opportunities with China, right? You know, the Guangzhou port in southern China is one of the world's busiest ports. A lot of ships would have to wait for sometimes up to several weeks in order to get berth at the Guangzhou port. Imagine if some of these ships could be diverted to our Sapangar Bay, for example. It would indeed increase the shipping volume a lot. But you see, a precondition for doing so would be that, well, there are also the goods to ship out from Sapangar, and that means we will have to have a much larger manufacturing base, certainly much larger than what KKIP is doing now. So I would applaud, for example, some of the initiatives mentioned by Dato Ng just now, my other good friend, about potentially building free trade zones both at Sapangar Bay as well as at KKIP. Well, we do need such free trade zones, and they could not stay forever on the drawing board. They have to be rolled out very expeditiously, very fastly. Now, over the past, let's say a decade or so, I have been involved in a lot of these activities, trying to get investment primarily from China and so on. But well, unfortunately, many of those activities were not quite successful. Huh? And you see what the Chinese investors, they were looking for, they were well, what they were looking for were mainly what they have been offering foreign investors over the past, let's say, 3 to 4 decades. They would like reciprocal treatments, just like many Malaysian merchants would go to China to invest there in the 1980s and 90s. China would roll out, number one, free trade zone. Number two, very often, well, all these infrastructures such as road access, such as water supply, electricity supply, and so on would be there for them. And then there are all these tax-free status and so on. At the very least, sometimes when you have merchants from China coming to Sabah to try to look for investment opportunities, we very often do not even have proper statistics for them to refer to. Huh? For example, what are some of the trade volumes? What are some of the production volumes of a certain agricultural products and so on? It's very difficult for us to put together all this information. Whereas those of us who would go to China, you would see that any city mayor, any provincial governor, they have tons of these statistics ready for you. Without these investments, without these industrial investments, frankly speaking, it's very difficult to ask them to simply, for example, park their containers here. It all comes in a package for the Chinese, for example. Huh? So I'm just sharing some of this experience I have with us trying to get China investors to invest in China, and thereby increasing, for example, our trade volume. We also must cut down on some of our red tapes, especially when it comes to land use, when it comes to land conversion, when it comes to building approval and so on. Because very frankly speaking, nowadays it takes up to 2, sometimes 3 years to get all these approvals, whereas some of our neighbors, you know, like we used to look at Vietnam as, frankly speaking, a rather backward regional country. But now, you know, I have friends who are manufacturers who told me, whereas it would take up to 2 to 3 years for them to get factory permits in Malaysia, in Vietnam, it could be done in half a year. So we need to roll out all these facilities which would make all these foreign investors doing business in Sabah easier before really we could talk about increasing the various trade volumes and thereby the usage hours of our Sapangar Bay. So I think I will stop here and try to answer questions later. Thank you.